Welcome, and thank you for tuning in and watching Dr. Hallerman, Growing Down Through Soulbriety, with your host, me, Elisa Hallerman. Today's episode 1, my first ever, will be with a very old, dear friend, Kris Carr. Kris Carr is a multiple New York Times best-selling author, wellness activist, and cancer thriver. She's been called a force of nature by O Magazine and was named a new role model by the New York Times. Kris is also a member of the Oprah's Super Soul 100, a group of the most influential thought leaders today. Other media appearances include Good Morning America, The Today Show, and The Oprah Winfrey Show. She and her work have been featured in Glamour, Prevention, Scientific American, Forbes, The Wall Street Journal, and other national publications. Kris has helped millions of people take charge of their health and live like they mean it through her award-winning blogs, books, online courses, and membership communities. You can learn more about Kris and her work at Kris Carr, that's KrisCarr.com. Please enjoy. Good morning, Kris Carr. I am so happy to see you. I had to make an appointment for a Zoom in order to see your face. I had to make it a work thing. But I'm so happy to see you, and I love your latest book. I love all your books, but I Am Not a Morning Person spoke to me on such a deep level because it came into my life at a time when I was and am in deep, deep grief after losing my cousin to cancer, who was like an older sister to me, and also sober. And so we had that in common, and we were just very, very tight. And it has been like nothing I've ever experienced, even though I've experienced grief. And this, I want to talk about this. Like, I think as we get older, maybe the grief intensifies, or maybe it's because I'm doing so much more work and on myself, and I'm healing, and I'm so much more present and conscious, and the one in the room who, and I think you talked about this also, who was like, okay, what do we need? And I love that moment where your dad says to you, like, I'm so glad I have you to be able to talk to about these things. And those were so many of the conversations that Marilyn and I had. And it's just, it's grief is a tough one. So we'll talk all about it. I am so glad to have you. And I know you for so long, but I feel like you probably took me on one of the greatest dates of my life. So why don't you tell everyone where you took me on our first date?
Well, it's the power of storytelling. I think that when we share our stories and we teach through our stories, it shows us that we're more similar and we're more connected than we even realize. Even when you know somebody, you're like, I didn't know that much about you, and I can so relate to that. And here's how this has happened in my own life. And this is my 7th book, and I did not go into this thing, writing another book, saying I should write a book about grief, because like many people, it was the one emotion I didn't want to touch. I didn't even think I had an issue with it. It's like, I talk about in the book, we grow up in this grief-phobic, messy, emotions-averse society, and few of us have the tools and the skill to attempt to survive storms of this magnitude when we find that we're up against the ropes, or we've just been newly diagnosed, or going through the divorce, the loss of a child, the loss of our former sense of self. For me,
that one really got me too.
For many of us, so we're always going to have these big shifts, and we're going to have these experiences where we feel like the rug has been pulled out from under us, and life that as we knew it completely fell apart or changed. And this book really addresses those difficult times that are inevitable. It's like I often say, we can't want the rainbow, but tell the universe to hold the rain.
Mm.
And we do that though, because we put certain emotions on a pedestal. We put certain experiences on a pedestal. Like we want to build a life of our dreams, but then it only includes the good and none of the bad, or none of the perceived bad. And it's just not true to a three-dimensional life. And so I think in a lot of ways, it sets many of us up for failure.
Yeah.
And so I went into this not thinking I would write a book on grief, but here we were in the middle of a global pandemic. I was approaching my 20-year anniversary of living with stage 4 cancer.
As a thriver.
As a thriver, thank you. My chosen father, who adopted me, was diagnosed with terminal pancreatic cancer, and he was approaching the end of his life. And the last thing I could do was write like a you go girl, you got this type of book, which is what I thought I should write. I was in the middle of another big storm. And so when I took that step back, I was like, I need tools for this. And I don't think I'm alone, because we're all going through a collective grief right now.
Exactly.
Get through it.
Exactly. I mean, I wrote my book during the pandemic as well. That's why it was just like, what do we need? We're so called to write, right? We have to listen to soul and those inner whispers and write what we need to hear.
Exactly. And I needed the medicine, and I was hoping that a few other people would need it too.
Oh, we all do. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for always giving us the medicine, Kris. This morning in my meditation, I always read Upon Awakening with Mark Nepo wrote. And it said, he starts with a Keats quote, and he says, beauty is truth, truth, beauty. And it's all about having the yin and the yang, and having the dark nights as well as enjoying the day, and being able to hold both, and how important that is. And I love when you decided to make the summer about all the things that your dad wanted to do. And just talk to me about what that, you wrote it so beautifully. Talk to me about what that was like in trying to have the joy in those little moments, and in the conversations, and with those kernels of wisdom that he would give you, and also having the messy mascara run down your face and locking yourself in the bathroom, and having those moments too, because I hear all the time people say, especially women, I was lying on the bathroom floor crying. And why do we go to the bathroom? Like, why are we hiding on the bathroom tile floor? Why is that an expression?
I think the bathroom is like the one place that we can be ourselves fully.
Yeah.
It is our sanctuary. And in this case, I was in a restroom, you know what I mean? So it wasn't like the best place, but it was, it's the womb, it's the cocoon of the bathroom. Through, as I said, I teach through story, and a very big through line of this story was my dad's diagnosis and passing. And so we're going to talk a lot about life and death and birth and grief, and how to understand that many of us have more days behind us than in front of us. And what does it mean to live a fully alive and awakened life? Because I think that that's our goal here. And from my own journey and experience, I've realized that we can't amputate any of our emotions and expect to be whole.
Right.
And you know this from your training and your background and your expertise, and yet so many of us want to amputate the parts or the parts of ourselves, the emotions that we deem unbecoming, or that the things that will make other people not like us, or the things that make us feel bad. And I was one of those people too. It was so interesting for me is being on this journey for 20 years now. It was a blind spot. Even as coach, practitioner, cancer patient, driver, I was completely oblivious to how much I was avoiding my own grief, my own trauma, all of that. And but so to your question, one of the through lines is, okay, how are we going to make the most of the time that we have? And you can apply that to this story of losing somebody, but also to your entire life. So we set out to, when we knew it was maybe a summer or two left, if we were lucky, we set out to have these beautiful experiences together. And as the time grew shorter, there was less things that we can do. It could be like playing a little gin rummy was the goal. But my dad said, I want to have a little fun every day. And so a little fun every day is what, I tried to create more often than not. And because I'm also new to I was at the time new to all that can arise as a result of grief. My therapist had a wonderful saying. She says that when the grief train pulls into the station, it brings all the cars.
Yeah, exactly.
What? The stuff you thought you were over, the stuff that you thought you processed, all of this stuff. But here comes trauma and here comes rage, and here comes more pain. And no wonder it feels so big and all encompassing, as if you're going to drown.
Yeah.
And no wonder we fight it and we hustle harder and we drink and we do all the things to try to avoid those feelings. And what I realized, I was more trying to avoid the pain versus those actual feelings. It was my fear of the pain, my ideas around what that pain would actually feel like. And that was actually worse than actually letting myself grieve or letting myself cry, letting myself fall apart. So
I think you said it perfectly in the beginning. It was such a short sentence, but you said you were afraid of drowning. And I think that's what I hear so much of the time. And I think so many people feel that way. They're really scared of breaking into pieces. And it's that moment that we have to alchemize, we have to break into pieces in order to be put together and and transform, not just change who we are, but transform who we are. And as I like to say, grow down. And we're all going to grow up, but growing down is where we make meaning and purpose out of the things that are happening, not not the other way around. And so we have to experience them. And it's not like bad things are going to happen to everyone. There's no, well, this must be the reason why. This is an opportunity for you to have growth. And
yes.
And I loved, and also I want to talk to you about, this is what I really resonated with. So here you are, a cancer thriver. You have changed your lifestyle. You have changed your everything about you in order to live this thriving life in every aspect of who you are. And every time I open my cabinet and I see a can, I think of you saying, get rid of those cans. And I literally hear that. So that is something that has stuck with me. But you really changed your whole lifestyle and became a different version of yourself after your diagnosis. And yet, it's all these years later that you're first having, in the face of your dad being sick, and that you first have to start to look at your own trauma from even your own experience and your own diagnosis. And I had that very similar, I was 10 years sober when I started to look at my trauma. Yeah. And it is so incredibly scary because there's a moment where in your life you're like, got it, I've got this, I'm good, I'm writing books, I'm doing this, I'm crushing it, everything's good. I mean, green juice, we're good. And we don't eat green juice, you drink it, but you know what I mean. And then all of a sudden we get hit. And so what was it like for you realizing that moment of, oh, wait, like, were you really clear that it was there lying underneath and you weren't dealing with it? Or was it like this tidal wave that hit you that you were like, okay, I actually didn't realize how much was underneath?
It was the latter. I didn't realize how much was underneath, because one of the things that I think I did very well to numb my own pain was to work hard. And because what I do for a living is helpful to some people, I thought it was a justification for workaholism.
Same.
And it's like, well, at least I'm doing something good in the world. And it was the way I did it. You know, it's just like, for me, it was no longer about taking drugs or drinking too much. It was about hustling harder.
Yes.
Right. And I didn't understand just how much I was exchanging one addiction for another in order to numb my feelings. And it wasn't until my dad was diagnosed, and, you know, of course, I'm going to put together a killer game plan. I remember we walked into a nutritionist office, and the nutritionist at the hospital looked at him and looked at me, and she was like, are you Kris Carr? And I was like, uh-huh. And she goes, oh, you're fine. Just do whatever she says. First of all, it's the last thing either of my parents wanted to hear.
Right.
And I went into full on, put the cape on,
Yes.
call everybody you know, create the healing game plan, call in all your favors. Like, you know, a lot of people 20 years into this business. We got this. I am not letting cancer take you. You're one of the most important people in my life throughout space and time and all lives. And the problem was that he wasn't interested in it, because he needed to go on his own healing journey. He could only tolerate so much. Chemo and radiation were essential because he had a very aggressive form of pancreatic cancer. And we got a lot of additional years. I mean, he lived 4.5 years, and we didn't even know if it was going to be 4 months. So there's a lot of that really valuable time that we got. But boy, did I have to make peace with that girl who was like, overdrive, save the world, save the person you love. And that's the same girl who helped me get to where I am today.
Yes.
And then, you know, your question about taking a summer and having these joyful moments, I had to actually check myself again, because I became Julie McCoy, the tour director, like have the ultimate bucket lists.
Right.
And if anything gets in my way of the ultimate bucket list experiences, I'm going to fall apart. I'm going to implode or explode. When what was really called for was presence.
Yes.
Was love.
Yeah.
Was connection, was peace. Underneath all the hustle was desperation and grief and trauma and a core wound, which is the parental wound for me, which is the core father wound of abandonment.
Right.
I didn't make that connection. It wasn't until one day it just came out of my mouth. I said, he's leaving me. My biological father left when I was conceived.
Right.
And so I was like, oh, this is what's happening.
Yes. Yes. It's so powerful. I mean, I always talk with my clients about getting to the core issue, because the addiction, whatever it is, to anything, what behavioral or substances, it doesn't matter, is a symptom. It's just a symptom. It doesn't make you a bad person. It started as a tool in order to be able to help you, to save you, to help you cope, to help you to not feel the pain that your psyche wasn't ready to bring up yet. And it comes when it comes. And that's the beautiful thing about our inner world. It knows when we're ready. It knows when something's supposed to come out of your mouth. And if we can just sort of follow that and believe that that exists, but listen and ride with it. And I think you did such a beautiful job of riding that wave. And it was the ultimate, father and daughter story and journey together of him leaving you all of these kernels of wisdom and showing you how to do all of this. And I just kept imagining during your diagnosis what it was like for your parents to feel that fear, that desperation. And he got to do it the way he wanted, almost in this lifetime. Like, there's no way my daughter's leaving before me. And I just thought, I'm crying. I just thought that was so beautiful and so perfect, and the opposite of the abandonment.
It was a very, very, and continues to be a very deeply healing relationship in my life. And I feel blessed. It's hard to even get one of those in a lifetime. And I definitely did. And it has softened me in such a powerful way, because I used to think that my strength was in my strength, that I'm tough, that I can outwork anybody, that I've got this, that I used to say, I'm like a roach, you can't kill me.
Right.
You can't kill me. There's one thing that's going to be here. It's like 3 things that are going to last.
Right.
Twinkies and roaches.
Twinkies. Are we allowed to eat Twinkies, or no? Not so much.
Twinkies have a non-destructible shelf life. I mean, literally, I don't think those things ever mold, which means you probably shouldn't eat them.
Probably shouldn't.
But my point is that there was some sort of badge of honor. I was just, here I am, this stage 4 cancer thriver. I'm indestructible, all this, that, and it was a bunch of crap. It was me putting on a front. And what I have learned since then is that my true strength is in my softness, in my willingness to be vulnerable, to be seen, to be uncomfortable, to cry. To be human is like where our true strength comes from, but we have to unlearn a whole bunch of stuff to get back to that place.
Sure. Well, we have to put those masks on in order to be able to show up in the life that we were given. And it's very protective. And it was very protective for you for many, many years. And, it kept you just doing what you needed to do in order to survive. And so it's not about like, oh, I wish I'd gotten this sooner. It's perfectly perfect the way it's unfolding now. And when we talk about the underlying issues, and I talk about addiction being a symptom, and inevitably what lies underneath is some form of trauma. And trauma is, so subjective to the person that is experiencing it. 2 people could be having the exact same experience. They could both be in a car accident and have the exact same experience. Your mom and you could both be going through something. But the gifts of the unlearning, as you say, and the new wisdom that you're collecting along the way are different. And so what's your relationship with your mom been like, and how have you been able to share those kernels with one another, in the past, since your dad has passed, what that's looked like for both of you in your own grieving lanes, but shared grief together?
My mom is a seeker, and she's the original seeker. She's the one who introduced me to Louise Hay and all of the books in the early days when I was wondering what the hell we were doing at mother-daughter weekends, when I wanted to just be partying with my friends, and we were at Kripalu doing yoga.
Perfect.
But she was planting seeds, and I think that our relationship has gotten a lot closer. There's a lot of healing that has happened through the process of grief and loss, and things that, you think are insurmountable, all of these are wounds that can never change, that have. And but what I realized going into this experience with my parents, because I chose to be closer in proximity, I moved, to be a very active part of this journey, because I had experienced so much love and kindness, especially from my dad welcoming me into his heart and into his family. And to me, it was like, this is how I'm going to show up for you for however long you have. And so, of course, in the beginning, there's friction because my mother and I are both alphas. And if we're both in trauma and we're both in overwhelm, fear, and driven by anxiety, which is the stories that we tell ourselves, right? The fear of what may or may not happen, the ruminations that also can be addictions in and of themselves.
Absolutely.
Then I realized that, okay, all of us are going to be working on whatever cylinder we got that day. And when that happens, there's even more trauma that can take place. And I just set a very clear intention. I am going to show up with love. If I let love guide me, I will make it through this. And I will be able to continue to show up no matter how triggered I get, no matter how painful it becomes. If I just lead with love, even on the days where I feel so skillless that I don't know what to do, because truly I have never done this before.
Right.
Love will show me what to do. And I just kept coming back to that intention to lead with love, lead with love. What would love say? What would love do? And that intention, and then obviously the action that I took when I didn't do it perfectly, there was plenty of times I messed up royally, but I think that's all ultimately brought us closer together and continues to strengthen.
Yeah, I love that. Lead with love. A lot of people don't know what to do, and that fear and anxiety, or they don't have, they don't have the finances to go and get outside help, or they don't have this, and they're just picking up books, or they're trying to go to the library and they're trying to look and research and watch things and Google and all of that. And I think that fear of not knowing what to do and thinking that something outside of yourself is going to have the answers, or someone outside of you is going to have the answers and able to help you through those really hard times, when if you just go back to your heart and you can just lead with love. I love that. That sounds perfect.
Hey, it's when in doubt.
Yeah, exactly.
Go back to love. I have a chapter in the book that's called Awkward Times, Awkward People. And it's the stuff that we say and the things that we do because we don't know what to do, because none of us were taught. And so it's like no shame. And I've made the mistakes and I'll probably make them again. But I think what's so interesting is because we're in fight or flight, and we have to give ourselves that grace to understand, like, oh, this is what my brain does when it's in fight or flight. I say things that are not the right things to say, or maybe, some of the classic things are centering yourself, making it all about you because someone's going through a difficult time. And you think perhaps you can find connection by sharing how bad it was for you when you went through something similar. But what you don't understand is you've just made it all about you, and that person feels lost and isolated. And so these are the things that we do when we don't know what to do. And my point is, and there's plenty of other ones, if you're me, you'll start coaching. My husband will often say, hey, no one paid you for that session. It's like, I got the answer. I can fix this for you. Let me tell you what you should do, this, that, and the other thing. There's 10 resources, and shush, just listen. And that's the point I want to make is when you don't know what to do, we lead with love and be present. Like, I don't know how to show up right now, but I love you and I'm here to listen.
Exactly. And I think what's also so important is, when we're in fight or flight, we're in that reptilian part of our brain, and there are no words in that part of our brain. It doesn't have a language. So it's just operating from a place of an automatic reaction that we're not in control of. So, you don't have the capability, unless you come back to your prefrontal cortex, to put language with the emotions and the feelings that you're having. And oftentimes, if trauma is stemming from a young place, when we're young, and like you were saying, going back to your original wound, I think you said you were 9, so you had language there, but can you imagine the times that you didn't understand, when you were 2, when you were 3, when you were 4, when you realized like he wasn't there, what was going on? And not having language at that age only leaves you with feelings and emotions of trauma. And so it's a dance as we get older to try to find the words. And that's why we often talk about all the different types of therapies, which you mentioned in your book, that talk therapy is not always appropriate because sometimes the trauma just lives in our body. And I loved what you talked about, and then we can wrap up with this, is the healing versus the curing. Because you spoke about it so beautifully in your own journey. I want you to tell that story because really resonated with me, even on the addiction side, and I'll tell you after we hear.
Yeah, this was a big one. This is a big part of my own journey, as you said. So I was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer 21 years ago, and I've been living with stage 4 cancer during that time. And I remember the first doctor that I met with suggested a triple organ transplant, and the next one gave me 10 years to live. And I realized I got to figure this out on my own. I have to find somebody who's capable of understanding this very rare, strange thing that's I'm dealing with. And I finally did. And he said, let's watch and wait. Let's see how fast this is moving, slow. Sometimes it can be slow. Sometimes it can be aggressive. It can change. But back in the back of my mind, I was like, you know what? Because this is the hustle. This is the hustle girl. They don't know how to cure me. I'll do it myself. Get out of my way. I got this. And I learned a lot of great things. I wrote some very helpful books, and a lot of people have benefited from those things. And I'm really glad I went on that journey. But in the back of my mind, I thought I wasn't good enough to be in a conversation with somebody like you unless I was cured. Unless I had that perfect hero's journey, that button, that ribbon at the end.
Yep.
And so in a lot of ways, I felt like a fraud as somebody who was teaching people about wellness, but I was still sick and I couldn't get rid of it. And so I had that not good enough voice, which where's that not good enough voice come from? The original trauma. Well, if you were good enough, maybe he wouldn't have left.
Right.
You were good enough, maybe you would be able to cure your cancer. And so again, these aren't conscious choices that I'm making as a 50-year-old woman, but little Kris is still in there sometimes, and she's got a lot to say from her place of pain. But it was at my 10-year mark where everybody was happy. My disease was still stable. I was still doing really well, and stable is very either no growth or very little growth. And my oncologist was thrilled. My parents were thrilled. My husband's thrilled. My friends are thrilled. Guess who's not thrilled? Me. I'm like so pissed and so upset with myself. And that was this big light bulb moment where I said, what if you live your entire life? It's stage 4 cancer. And you live a magnificent, wonderful life. Sure, there's certain things that you won't do, but on the whole, it's a beautiful life.
Right.
Every single day, you were trying to make it something else, make it better, make it perfect, make yourself cured, because it's not good enough until this happens.
Right.
A fucking waste it would be. And that's when I realized that curing happens in the physical body, and sometimes it happens and sometimes it doesn't, and it's not our fault, and we don't always have control over it. But healing takes place on a soul level, and healing can happen anytime on our journey, and it can happen even at the moment of our death and beyond. There is no timeline on healing, and is available to each and every one of us, no matter what resources we have. And that was a big turning point for me. And from that point on, I started to make wellness decisions for my healing,
That's right.
not my curing.
That's right. I love that so much. You know, we always talk about there's no cure for addiction. And so people are left with there's some sort of stigma, there's some sort of title, there's some sort of label that gets put on, you know, on us. Some people deal with relapses consistently because they haven't yet healed or been able to find the right person or the right resources to heal that underlying trauma. And it is so important for people to understand exactly what you just said, that healing is at a soul level. It is something that you can do on a daily basis. And each day, regardless, the healing journey looks like, you know, the stock market. It's up and down, it's up and down, it's up and down. But, you know, if we're talking about, you know, the wins, we also have to talk about the dark nights as well. And the going up and down is the healing journey. And I talk about the soul journey a lot. And, you know, I'll tell people, like, you're not on one soul journey, you're on many. And I think for me, when I realized there was more than one hero's journey, more than one soul journey that was going to happen in my life, I was like, oh, it was this light bulb of, oh, now I'm on another one. Okay, so I went on that one. I gathered all this wisdom. I shared it with the world or the people that matter.
Yeah.
And now I'm on another one. Oh, okay. And I think that's, you know, it's so important to tap into. What I've gotten from you is love and healing and compassion and vulnerability.
Thank you. Well, that couldn't be a better compliment, honestly. And the Kris of today sees that as the ultimate compliment.
Yeah.
You know, and I'm really grateful.
Yeah. Yeah. This book really hit home for me, and I just loved it so much. And I'm so glad we got to talk about it. So proud of you.
Thank you, honey. Love you.
Love you.